Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to week 3, Cody. Are we already in week 3 of the NBA season? Look, everybody's played about 10 games, okay? And last night was one of the wildest nights that I can remember in a long time. It's certainly the wildest night of the year, and it's one of the wildest nights of the last few years where Cody's like, did you see the Victor Wembanyama little comeback and the threes at the end of the game? And it's like, that was nothing. Cody, the Pistons were down 5 points with 4 seconds left and won the game.
I'm just looking at the scores now. This is honestly how it went before the show. Ben's like, did you see the wildest night of the season yesterday? And I was like, I saw Spurs Bulls, and he's like, no, that was like the least interesting of the things that happened. So I'm woefully behind on stuff from yesterday. So what was the most exciting of the finishes you saw yesterday?
I think off the top of my head, it was the Cavs being down 3 in overtime. It was already fun going into overtime, this back and forth wild game. And then they had not 1, not 2, not 3 shots to win it in Miami or to tie it, but Donovan Mitchell coming from one side of the floor to get an offensive rebound with 3 seconds left under the basket, run out to the corner and hit a fadeaway 3 falling out of bounds with 0.4 of a second left to tie it, only for Eric Spoelstra to go with the lob with 0.4 of a second left on the inbounds pass to get the Andrew Wiggins dunk to beat the buzzer. That was probably the highlight of the night. Yeah, it was, the whole night felt like that. It was crazy.
Oh, that's when you sent the message that was like Spoelstra after timeout magic. And
Spoelstra
at that point I was like, I'm done watching basketball. So
what did you do last night? I think everyone deserves to know what on earth you were doing, missing the greatest night of basketball ever.
Well, I went to bed. That's that. I caught up on Spurs and Bulls. I finished that. I did some dishes. I brushed my teeth. I did a little bit of reading, and then I fell asleep. That was my evening.
That's great. Well, you mentioned Wemby. We have to state we're still going with our Wemby watch as of right now, Cody, because it has not been taken away from us. As in case you're new around here, we're tracking what's his name, Victor Wembanyama's sort of historical stat possibility this year. How would you describe what we're doing? I'm doing a terrible job of this right now.
I think that's a good way. It's one of the rim protection numbers that we've been playing with the last couple of years, and it just seems like Wemby is more or less breaking it, which is great because I actually have a follow-up stat and maybe a quiz for you, Ben. So update us on Wemby Watch, and I'll transition to something else.
Yes, Wemby Watch. The Spurs have come back down to historical territory. They're only 10 points better than league average when he's on the court defensively. They are 9 points worse than league average. So he's still getting a 19-point change in his defensive rating. We will track that as long as that stays in the all-time upper echelon like that. And he's still number 1 in all our rim protection stats because teams are taking, this is my favorite, Cody, teams are taking 12% fewer attempts at the rim when the man is on the court. Less than 1/4 of the opponent's attempts are coming at the rim when Victor Wembanyama is on the court.
I mean, it makes sense. You watch him, and anyone that tries to drive in the court has like multiple, it's not even head fake. They just kind of look at the rim because they're like, maybe I can get this shot up. And then they just don't. All right. So I have a streak for you. Let's do a Wemby streak watch right now, because if I'm not mistaken, the streak is still going on where he has 95 straight games with at least one block.
Yes. He had some blocks last night. Yes.
So 95 straight games with at least one block. That is third all time. Dikembe Mutombo is number 2 with 116 straight games with a block. Do you know who number 1 is and how many blocks that individual has in a streak?
Man, Cody, I'm pretty sure you asked me this last week. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, last week.
I did. It's actually different. You're gonna guess Mark Eaton because that's what we talked about. It's not Mark Eaton. It's not.
No, wait a second. This is the longest consecutive streak of having at least one block in a game.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And you're telling me it's not Mark Eaton?
It is not Mark Eaton.
Man. I'm going to go back to Hakeem Olajuwon, my original instinct.
I think that's a good guess, but it is actually one of his contemporaries, Ben.
David Robinson?
Patrick Ewing.
No, that's not right. That's
with
not right.
145 straight games with a block.
No.
145 straight games.
I don't buy that. Nope. I think that's New York Knicks home cooking in the scorekeeper. I don't buy it.
I got another streak for you because Wemby's best streak of at least 2 blocks in a game is 17. That's not currently happening. He's actually broken that streak. So he has 17 straight games with at least 1 block. That would be 48th all time.
With at least 2 blocks.
With at least 2 blocks. Yep.
Yeah.
Number 2 all time is Manute Bol with 45. Mark Eaton has the most consecutive games with at least 2 blocks. Can you tell me what his number 1 streak is with at least 2 blocks?
Wow. 68.
77. Mark Eaton has a streak of 77 straight games with at least 2 blocks, more than 30 more games than Manute Bol's number 2. I think that's a very fascinating stat, and Wemby has a long way to go to match Mark Eaton in that.
It's a good Wemby watch for this week. That's a very good Wemby watch. We have also, we just talked about, I mentioned Hakeem Olajuwon. We've talked about very tall people. I flirted with doing the power rankings this week. I was like, we're very close. We're going to have to do it next week.
Yep.
The season is starting to coalesce. The season is starting to take shape. It's getting very exciting. And if you look at these standings right now, not only do we have some good teams, it looks like sort of floating to the top of the standings, but you look at the top offenses in the league. Cody, who has the top offense in the league right now after about 10 games? I know some teams have played 9 or 11, but basically 10 games into the season.
Man, things change this early in the season. Last I checked a couple days ago was Houston. Is it still Houston?
It's the Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
The Houston Rockets of NASA aviation fame. I'm watching a NASA show. It's just all in my head right now. The Rockets have the best offense in the league. But what's interesting about the Rockets offense right now is that they are shooting 42% from 3 as a team. 42% from 3 as a team, which would be ridiculous by itself. But when you consider the fact that it's the Rockets and they're not a particularly good shooting team by personnel, cast of characters based on previous years, that is what's really astounding to me. So just to put this into perspective, Alperen Şengün is hitting 39% of his threes right now. This is a person who did not even make threes, did not even know what the three-point line was in the past. And now he's hitting 39%. Kevin Durant, 42%. We can lock that. That's good to go. He's one of the greatest shooters ever. Amen Thompson, 22%. We can lock that. That's good to go. He can't shoot yet. Jabari Smith's a good shooter. He's at 37%. But then this is where it gets weird, Cody.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading this out so we can... 42% sounds fun, but when you hear the actual rotation players' numbers, they're just ridiculous.
Yep.
Tari Eason shooting 51% from 3 on 5 threes a game. Tari Eason is shooting 51% from 3 on 5 threes a game. This man is a 36% career three-point shooter, including this season. Josh Okogie is shooting this season 50% from 3. Career is 31%. 50% from 3. Reed Shepherd, who is a good shooter, is shooting 48% from 3. 48% from 3 on 5 threes a game. Yeah. Do you think this will hold up at all? What's going on?
It is shocking because when you watch, that's something I literally wrote down. I'm like, I don't know if I've seen Tari Eason miss a corner 3 yet this season. Like, it's literally a note I took. So I just pulled it up, and it looks like about over 50% of his total 3-point attempts have been from the corners. And according to Basketball Reference, he's shooting about 63% on his corner 3s. And Josh Okogie is shooting about 57% on his corner 3s. Right. So there is something to teams are clearly sagging off these guys, right? So like, we have to stop some of these other guys that can create, like what we talked about with the Rockets is they don't have a ton of creation, so to speak, like we would usually see from the point guard position. Kevin Durant's getting a little bit older. He doesn't assault the rim like he's able to. Kevin Durant is obviously their main offensive guy. So they need to send as much as they can to stop people like that. The ball swings around, boom, boom, gets to the corner. And these guys are just flamethrowers right now. This is like the Drew Holiday effect in Boston. Like, didn't he shoot like a couple of years ago? He literally shot like 60% from the corners one of those seasons. It seems to be one of those stats that just like picks a player. Like, it just haunts a specific couple of players, except like the opposite of haunt. It like, imbues them with special powers. So maybe it holds, but I don't quite believe in that, Ben. I do not think Tari Eason and Josh Okogie are 50+% corner 3-point shooters.
Oh, okay. Well, do you believe in the Houston offense in general then? I mean, they're first in offense and there's a ton of stuff going on. There's one major thing that they're doing that I want to get to. But when you look at that or when you watch them play, do you get the sense that we'll park the playoffs for a second because that could be a different animal, that this is a regular season offense? Let's go back. I feel like every year at the beginning of the year, we have an offense like this, and with Cleveland last year, and we say, how good will this offense be at the end of the year? Do you buy this being a really good offense? Do we have a bold Cody prediction about where this offense will land when we come back in April?
They have the way that they're able to generate offense is really interesting. I don't have this number in front of me, so I want to ask you this, and that might be inform what I say. Do you happen to have their half court offensive numbers right now? Half court per 100 possessions.
Their half court per 100 possessions, I do not have.
Okay.
I have something else, though. I have something else.
Tell me something else.
The something else is that Houston grabs a lot of offensive rebounds.
Yes.
And when I say grabs a lot of offensive rebounds, I mean no team in 30 years has grabbed as many misses as the Rockets grab when they have the ball. Their offensive rebounding percentage, as of recording this, is 37%. We have not had a team in the 21st century over 35 or 36%, something like that. So they are playing a very old style of basketball when it comes to the offensive rebounding. Now, if you watch them play, you can geometrically feel this. There are guys in the paint when they go Twin Towers with Steven Adams. He's doing his gravity thing where he's hawking bodies down on the baseline and chucking people out of the way. And Amen Thompson's always sneaking along the baseline and throwing, what's his name? I just crashed. Need to reboot the brain. Alperen Şengün. I'm like the guy who has the ball. Alperen Şengün, he's coming down the lane, and all of these bodies are converging in a very like 1980s-esque sort of manner where you have like three offensive players who can all grab rebounds heading toward the hoop as the shot is going up. And my goodness, Cody, this team with the offensive rebounding is out of control. So what I have for you is their first chance offense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Their first chance offense right now is 5th in the league. And it's not very far behind the best first chance offense in the league. They're all kind of clumped together.
Okay.
So the first chance offense is still pretty good, but the second chance offense is kicking everything up a notch. And I'll get your reaction to that.
So that is really interesting, because the other thing I was thinking about that might be juicing their offense as well is their ability defensively to create easy opportunities in transition, right? And I'm thinking specifically about the Spurs game recently. Josh Okogie, early thinkies shout out, like one night guarding Wemby. I forgot he was guarding somebody else a little out of position the next night, but he seems to be on a team that has guys like, Tari Eason and Amen Thompson. He's like, hey, you're a big physical guy. You can go take on some of these bigger dudes and rough them up. And he did that. And he was, he stripped Wemby at half court, able to get a layup that way. Amen Thompson's always hanging around passing lanes, ready for a pick six and things like that. So I actually expected their first chance offense to be lower than that. I would have estimated something closer to 10. So them being 5 is really interesting. And the other thing I think when I think about half-court possessions when I watch them, a lot of isolation, a lot of straight pick and roll, right? And guys like Amen Thompson, too, like, he's not necessarily spacing out. He does a great job of flashing to the middle, catches it. He had this great pass to Adams the other day, right? Where he catches it like he ran to the middle, jumped in the air, caught it, and he has such hang time that he faked the pass to Adams, realized that the pass was actually open, and then brought it back and threw it to him for a dunk pass, right? And he did that all in the air. So they have funky players like that can do stuff. And then Şengün and Durant, there's just a lot of like, hey, here's your elbow isolation. Like, do some stuff with this, right? And obviously we've talked about Durant being one of the greatest scorers of all time. He's lost a little bit of his luster there, but we're still talking about Kevin Durant that can call on that 6'11", whatever the reach is on that shot, 9+ feet or something like that. And Şengün, you see it in one of the last possessions against the Bucks where Giannis is taking him one-on-one, and Şengün does this like he's like dancing around. Giannis is trying to pick at him. Giannis, gambles a little too much. Şengün goes down to the basket. Portis is there. Şengün spins around him, hits an and one. So they have some funky isolation scores. They have some funky guys that can make some passes. They got Eason and Okogie who aren't missing from the corners. And then I could issue an apology for Reed Sheppard, but I'm going to let you react to everything that I said first.
Well, your instinct, I think, is really interesting because you were saying I would expect their first chance offense to be something closer to 10th. What I did is I took their 42% 3-point shooting and I said, what if they only shoot like one of the best 3-point teams in the league? What if they only shoot 38%,
Yep.
which is still really good? And I guess it's possible they finish the year there. I think it's really hard to shoot 40% in general, especially when you have that roster. So they could be 36% by the end of the year, but let's say they're 38%, which maybe is in play. Their first chance efficiency would be just about 10th or 11th, which is exactly what your instinct was. And that was what my instinct was too, where you have an offense that is kind of successful so far this year. I think Durant, that we talked about in the preview show, he's giving them some boost both as a scorer, a little playmaking, some of his gravity, just the shooting and the ability to occupy defenders in certain sets. That helps Alperen Şengün. They've done a really nice job, I think, of toggling between like, we need Şengün to drive this possession. We need Durant to drive this possession. Hey, we were free flowing. Amen Thompson has the ball, right? There's like a really nice balance there that they found. But man, the offensive rebounding to me seems more stable. It seems like it has less variability. And so if you're somewhere around 10th or something like that in your first chances and your second chance offense is going to guaranteed to like boost your overall offensive efficiency by 2 or 3 points, I think Houston's going to have a good offense. I don't think it's going to be the top of the league, but that's a development when you know their defense is good. And it's like, now we're talking, can they get the 1 seed kind of regular season?
The process that you're talking about with like Adams grabbing those offensive rebounds, that's as stable as you can get. Like you watch, this isn't him lucking into offensive rebounds, right? Like teams are just throwing bodies at him, right? Just trying to move him aside. And he's just kind of like playing with fourth graders. It looks like sometimes he just kind of like tips it to himself a couple of times. Like, oh, look at this. I have the ball again, and kick it out. And he just grabs another offensive rebound. It's honestly one of my favorite things to watch this season is just people trying to fight with the Terminator down there. I shouldn't say the Terminator. That's Kawhi Leonard. We need a nickname for Adams though. There's
Kawhi Leonard is the term. Wow.
I thought people called him that for a period of time, like 2017. I think it
was for 2.25 months. 2.25.
When they were going to win the championship. Obviously.
How is Steven Adams so strong? I feel like you would have articles and insights onto some kind of New Zealand farmland training or something. How is the man that strong?
So, okay, I think one aspect of it, doesn't he have like 16 siblings? He has a shocking amount of siblings.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure at least one of them's an Olympic level. I'm going to get this wrong, but I think like a shot putter. And if it's not a shot putter, it's one of the sports that's like very similar to shot put. And like the whole point of like these throwing sports, javelin, shot put, things like that, is just unbelievable full body core strength. We're not talking about you're isolating the biceps. It's like, oh, look, I ripped out 100 reps. Great. Like, let's see the strength that you have. We talked in the top peaks of the 21st century. We talked about Kawhi's core strength. Adams just kind of has that whole thing, but he's just like multiple inches and however many more pounds bigger than Kawhi. So I think it's just like taking that same idea as just like this full unit that knows how to use everything, that's able to get a lower center of gravity. He knows how to like wrestle in that kind of way. So I think there's a lot of aspects of like the way that he's grown up, and I think the way that he just understands his body works that works out so well for him.
Yeah, and I think the offensive rebounding there specifically fits with the personnel style they have. They're not trying to create a ton of space. They're not trying to play like the Miami Heat and open up the elbows in the lane and drive and slash downhill. It's this very plodding giant. They're just a giant team, and they are very good right now. So
I think talking about the isolation tool, there's a couple other things. I think Amen Thompson should get a shout out for scrounging around and grabbing some of these other offensive rebounds, because it always feels like if Şengün or Adams doesn't gobble up an offensive rebound, it'll sometimes bounce out a little farther away. And then you just see like Thompson just like scurrying. He's just like appears and he grabs it. And it's like, oh, he's just always there ready to pick up some of the leftovers, like a little raptor from a Tyrannosaurus Rex or sort of thing. But then when we talk about like running the pick and roll, we talk about some of the isolation stuff. You know, Durant is obviously trying to get to that mid-range for that jumper. Şengün's going to kind of just like, yeah, very impressed with the way that he was bodying Wemby. Like he was trying to figure out the way of like, hey, I'm going to really use my body to dislodge some space and get it up there. And I thought it was mildly effective at times. And then Thompson, is just like this straight line drive kind of person. Like if he gets a step on somebody, he can get down there for a layup. So they have these three guys that are able to do very different things with the ball offensively when they're operating as a primary creator.
You know who I'm very impressed with these days, Cody?
You're not going to say Reed Shepherd, but I should at least shout out Reed Shepherd and say he looks really good. And I feel really bad about what I said in the preview, but now you can say who you're going to say.
Well, okay. I shouldn't say I'm really impressed. I should say fascinated. That's a much better word. Yeah.
Who?
I'm not impressed in the sense that they're kind of doing exactly, it makes sense to me, but it's also fascinating. And that's your Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This to me, I don't know if this is a hot take at all, because I'm completely disconnected from anyone talking about basketball at this point in time. So maybe everyone's talking. It's actually fascinating to say that and just have a vulnerable moment here live in front of. I have no clue what anyone is talking about. None. None whatsoever. Like zero idea. I haven't heard a podcast in like a month. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think, are better this year than they've been since Drew Holiday left.
Oh, wow.
Is that a hot take?
I'm trying to think. Man, they were. When did Holiday leave? Was that 23? That was the end of the 23.
Was his last season.
24 and 25. Man, yeah, Middleton wasn't what he was those couple of seasons.
Yeah.
I have to think about this one. That's a good take. I'm going to have to think about that, because I think that's hot enough that I'm going to have to go back, but I'm also like, oh, wow, I haven't heard that take before.
I think someone's going to try to give me the, if everyone's healthy, they were a more dangerous playoff team, of course, but everyone wasn't healthy ever at any point. And then also during the regular season, when you have to deal with the actual players that you had, that fit, that whole Lillard Giannis fit with the other players as well. Your supporting players are really, really relevant when you have thin top end talent like that. I just think this is a much better way to go about it. And it's fascinating to me because for a couple reasons. One, we have yet another example of Doc Rivers not taking like a ton of talent, like not taking superstars and trying to make a great team. It's the opposite. He's trying to take these spare parts and fit them together. And unless I'm leaving one out, this would be his fourth time having great success coaching like this, where he did it in Orlando with Tracy McGrady. Mm-hmm. He did it briefly in Boston before they retooled, and some of that was trying to get Paul Pierce to play more on ball and just getting young players involved and things like that. He did it with the Clippers one year in 2019. I think that was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's rookie year, the year before they brought in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and flipped the whole team over. And then he's doing it here in Milwaukee, where when he came in, there's the expectation of you have all these stars and you have to make it work. Mm-hmm. And now it's really just Giannis. And then how do we surround Giannis with the right role players, right? It's a little defense here, a little shooting there, and now we're back to like a one-man offense. It's just really fascinating to me.
So, yeah, Doc Rivers strikes me as a coach that's good, pretty straightforward concepts. Like if you have like, hey, here's our main guy. Here's how we're going to have to butter our bread. Like we don't have a ton of options because, we just don't have a ton of high level talent. It seems like he's good with some of these simpler concepts. There's an action that just seems so straightforward when you have like a 5-out sort of thing. Giannis is kind of trailing on the play this other day, right? And you could see like Turner was standing at the top of the perimeter, right? He's standing at the top. He doesn't have the ball. Giannis is about midcourt. And you can see the player that has the ball is over on above the break over here. And Giannis is pointing to Turner. He's like, past him. All right. Everyone else is spread out around the perimeter. As soon as Turner catches the pass, Giannis just darts into the paint and kind of uses Turner as like a DHO rip sort of action there because everything's just open there. And Turner, I got to say, the passing's been a little bit rocky. He's still trying to find his connection with Giannis, but it was so open. And Giannis, when he has that line drive, most people that defend him can't keep up with him. So he just kind of threw it in the space and Giannis scored. And I'm like, that was so simple. Like that was a nice little quick hitter drop. And I feel like Doc has done a really good job of leveraging the shooting and the 5-out spacing and whatever else, like using Giannis in different positions instead of just like, hey, get the ball, everyone spread out and you're going to run isolation or pick and roll. Like I've seen a lot more Shaq type of possessions from Giannis where he's just bullying people in the paint and he's creating all of this mega, gravity in the paint like we talked about in the Shaq episode. And then we have some of those other quick hitters. So, you're right. I think Doc is leveraging what we talked about with Giannis, where he ups the amount of paint attacks that his team gets just because of how much he's able to get into the paint. And he juices the percentage of shots that players get from beyond the arc. And when you're surrounding them with a bunch of these guys that can shoot, like that's a recipe for a really solid regular season team. Like if you look at the players around him, the minutes per game leaders for the Bucks, we're talking 44% from three, 37% from three, 38% from three, 47% from three. You surround that with Giannis, like, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that they've started the way that they've started.
How do you feel about AJ Green?
I think AJ Green is a flamethrower.
Okay.
He's there was just in general, his screening actions with Giannis have been great. I've been noticing this for, at least last year as well, too. Like some actions where Giannis is handling, AJ Green likes to come up and ghost the screen. And there's a little bit of the Curry gravity sort of thing where people are kind of like, oh my goodness, we can't let Giannis get downhill, but we also can't let AJ Green pop out. And that little second always just creates some really good action. So he understands how to leverage his spacing ability. And I like the way that he's fit in next to what Giannis brings to the table.
I asked because I assume he was that 47%.
He is
number. Yeah, because that man can absolutely shoot the leather off the basketball. But it's fascinating in the sense that I think it's yet another story where if you had certain scorers that could put up bigger numbers and carry bad teams, and it's like, oh, he's coming in, he's averaging 20 points per game. I mean, the Bucks almost literally had this with Kyle Kuzma coming from Washington. Like, oh, he's an 18-point per game scorer. But you're much better off with a guy that can hold his own defensively, which is AJ Green, and to some degree, Gary Trent Jr. And then those guys shoot really well. And in the case of AJ Green, he has more of that movement shooting. So you can run what I've called the Giannis offense before, as a lot of these base sets where if you're not creating huge runways for Giannis to drive into in isolation, you have AJ Green come up and set a screen at a flat angle so the defense doesn't know where he's going, and then he can pop out to the perimeter, and you create a lot of confusion that way. And that's that marriage and that symphony between Giannis's downhill pressure and shooters on the outside that we talked about during our summer series. And I think it's worked pretty well so far, and I think they're pretty buttoned up on both ends of the court. I mean, technically right now they're a little below average on defense. We can talk about that. They're a little above average on offense. But as far as Doc Rivers goes, he's always had solid X's and O's. He's always been able to put solid X's and O's out there. This is a separate kind of thing when we criticize or critique coaches from playoff rotations and playoff adjustments and how are you going to come up with an out-of-the-box scheme or, getting 2 or 3 stars to work together. Those are all very different things. But the X's and O's and some of the stuff he's run and all his stops have been pretty nice. And I think we're seeing that here where when it's a lot different trying to take high-end talent versus, hey, we got the roles are clearly defined here. And if anything, I think Doc gets credit for leaning into those roles more where he's like, no, AJ Green's our starter. That's our starter. He fits really well. And yes, Miles Turner's coming along, but I think the Bucks are just very competitive this year without having a super high ceiling.
I think in general, we talk about like scalability in terms of players, like how good are you going to be when you're next to other high-end talent? I think we underrate just how difficult it is to almost be a scalable coach, so to speak. Like to be able to take a bunch of high-end talent that, especially if they don't necessarily mesh, and make something happen, right? Because there's a couple of avenues you could do. Like if you try and run traditional stuff, sometimes they just don't work that well, and you have to try and think of a paradigm shift. But if you're going to try and shift the paradigm, like there's a lot of people you have to answer to before you try something like that. Like we talked about this with Eric Spoelstra and the Heatles, right? We talked about it with them where it's like, all right, so you have Dwayne Wade, you have LeBron James, Chris Bosh, who's not shooting threes at that point. And then I guess Joel Anthony starting at the 5, another non-spacing big. And you're like, I don't know, like the spacing's not great, but also we don't know about 5-out concepts too much in the NBA. So on one hand, you can retroactively look back and be like, hey, Spoelstra, how do you not know to just like space him out? Chris Bosh should be shooting a bunch of threes and put Ray Allen in there instead of whomever else. But those kinds of decisions are so difficult to make, right? Like you can try these different concepts, but how long in the NBA do you try and do it until you give up on it? Where you're like, well, it's been 8 games and the outcome has been middling. Like, do we just keep going along with this or do we go back to something more traditional? And then sometimes you run into things like the Grizzlies where, they instill this offense that's very, new age, not a lot of pick and roll. And then your star player gets unhappy about it. So there's just a lot of things that happen. as a coach that prevent you from being like, oh yeah, I'm a genius here, and this thing I'm going to try is going to work out perfectly.
I thought when you mentioned Eric Spoelstra just now, I thought you were going to talk about this year's Miami Heat, right? Which I think we'll continue to talk about in more detail at a later date. But the Heat offense, in essence, is very egalitarian. It's not the type of offense that you would necessarily put in if you had Luka Doncic and LeBron James and Austin Reeves on your team, right? And then surrounded them with 3-and-D players. It's not the type of offense that the Bucks would put in with Giannis and then other shooters around him. So you're sort of limited in some sense by the types of cards you can play based on your personnel, which is of course obvious. But when you think about you mentioned the original Heatles, Eric Spoelstra, when he was younger, he's trying to solve a problem, which is not an easy problem to solve, which is if I have redundancy amongst my stars, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James, and Chris Bosh, because retrospectively, I think we've sort of moved Bosh a little bit into a different category, right? But at the time, it was a big three, which means you've got big three money. They all made the same amount of money. They're big free agent signings. Bosh is like, how many All-Star games did nine All-Star games?
It was a lot.
Bosh? It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at that and you're saying, I've got these three players. Chris Bosh is a post player. How do I solve that problem? That is a very different thing than when you have Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell and this new rookie named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and you're trying to figure out what to do with him, and whoever else was on the Patrick Beverly, whoever else was on the 2018-19 Clippers that my memory can't access right now, right? That is a very different kind of solution to look for as a coach. And I think that's at the core of what you're talking about when you talk about a coach being a floor raiser or a coach being a ceiling raiser or having scalability or something like that as a coach.
Yeah, and Spoelstra, I feel like throughout his career has shown that, and I'm not saying he's not great with high-end talent. That Heedle situation is a very difficult situation. I would love to see what other coaches would have tried there, especially in the context of all of these Roy Hibbert and David Wester out there, and Joakim Noah and Carlos Boozer, like just these titanic Tiago Splitter and Tim Duncan, right? Like there wasn't a spaced out kind of league. But we've seen multiple times now, multiple Heat iterations over the last decade or so, where he can just dip into like the mad scientist that he is and just try some stuff. And this year might be the craziest of them all, like you've talked about a little bit, where they're barely setting screens, right? And this is something that's been talked about. And I've listened to some podcasts, Ben, and people like talking about the lack of pick and rolls that the Heat are running.
They're mentioning that. That's good. Okay.
It's definitely something that's coming up. So I feel like it's an easy sell for Spoelstra to go in the locker room and be like, hey, it's your choice. We can lose every game and run a traditional amount of pick and rolls, or we can try this new thing. It's going to be egalitarian. Everyone's going to touch the ball, and it's going to look different from what you're used to, but it's going to be more successful than something more traditional. But then you throw somebody out there that's used to running, 30 pick and rolls a game, 40 pick and rolls a game. You got to get that person to buy into it, right? And I feel like Spoelstra is just more comfortable. And again, not denigrating him or anything, but he's more comfortable being like, all right, I have a bunch of these guys that are just not quite good enough to try like a traditional thing. Let's see what we can cook up together here.
You think Spoelstra is most comfortable in that situation?
I think so. I think Spoelstra's best when he's working with, not traditional pick and roll types of stars.
Do you think it's easier as a coach to come up with solutions that take less established stars, less established or less effective high-end skills from your best players, and say, how can I make an offense that takes us from 24th in the league to 12th? Is that floor-raising effort as a coach generally an easier problem to solve? I will throw Brad Stevens into that ring, where I think there was somebody, I can't remember how popular the nickname was, they would call his offense Basic Brad. And it's like when the Celtics weren't expected to be good and he's figuring out, how can I run sets and actions with players that have particular skills around Isaiah Thomas, the new Isaiah Thomas from Washington, not the Isaiah Thomas from the Detroit Pistons, right? Like, how can I empower him and put him in situations where the defense has to make decisions, while also maybe using the fact that we have stretch bigs or something like that. He seemed to be really effective with some of those sets and those offensive series that he'd run. Then you fast forward to the criticism years where it's like, okay, we got Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown's really good now. We have Kyrie Irving. He's there. And then Kemba Walker after. You have Al Horford. Unfortunately, they didn't get to play really with Gordon Hayward, but he was another name there. And then it's like you realize, you feel how much harder it is to take that type of talent, put them together, and go from the 8th best offense to the best offense or something like that.
I'm wondering, off the top of your head, can you think of coaches that you would say excel and have? I guess the first two, I should finish the sentence, excel at having really high end talent. I like to cut myself off a lot. The first two names that came to mind for me are Phil Jackson and Steve Kerr, that are really good at leveraging, having elevated personalities, one might say, that have expectations for what the game is going to look like on the court, and maybe getting to people to buy in more. Now, obviously, it's nice when you have guys like Michael Jordan and Shaq and Kobe and Steph Curry and Draymond Green to kind of play around with the chessboard. But again, we can't look at somebody like Draymond Green and be like, this is what he always was. Like, Steve Kerr stepped into that role, and then Draymond Green became Draymond Green, right? So I don't know. Those are two guys that came to mind when I thought about that side of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think those are the first two guys. I was actually going to ask you the same question. So even though you didn't finish your sentence, I thought I knew where you were going. Phil's interesting, of course, because when we talk about just the offensive side of the ball, we're thinking of the triangle, and Phil did not invent the triangle or was really the leader of the, Tex Winter was the architect of the triangle and on that coaching staff for both the iterations in Chicago, where stuff is pretty similar from the first three-peat to the second three-peat. And then I think you get something really impressive in Los Angeles, but that's also harnessing the fact that you have Shaquille O'Neal, and the triangle's really a triple post offense. It's a post-heavy offense. Steve Kerr's another tricky one because you have the confounding variable of Steph Curry, and the idea that he kind of has only done it once, in the sense that Steve comes in, looks at the offense, and look, there were a lot of us at the time who were also frustrated by what Mark Jackson was doing with the offense. You go back and you watch, we did it over the summer, where you're like, why is Steph Curry standing in the corner and Jermaine O'Neal is posting up at the end of a key playoff game? This doesn't feel right. But nonetheless, that was a really good solution that he put forth for that crew. So I think those two guys are great. There are some other coaches that probably haven't won championships that would come to mind for me. One of the first ones is Rick Adelman. Rick Adelman seemed to always have really good offenses. And I think we could debate, when we talk about floor raising, like, what does it mean to have Peja Stojakovic as your best offensive player versus Clyde Drexler versus the the heavy hitting Michael Jordans of the worlds and whatnot. But it's not easy, Cody. I don't think it's easy. George Karl's another guy who's had really interesting success with a wide variety of high-end talent on the offensive side. And then that doesn't even mention defense. I assume we're still focusing on offensive solutions for stars. But yeah, if we go defense, then you open up the Larry Brown, Pat Riley sort of side of the equation. Yeah.
I think we could throw Greg Popovich in here too. And I know he had the same
who?
Mr. Popovich. And I know he's had these stars forever. He had the same trio of, Parker, Ginobili, and Duncan forever. But the way that he's able to transform those three and put them into different roles and kind of tweak with the offense that way, I think shows that same kind of level of analysis. And I think something that these guys do, that you talk about Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, you have to get players to buy in, right? And I think that's part of the secret sauce. Like, you can have all the X's and O's in the world, but you have to somehow get everyone to come along with it. Like, Doug Collins is coaching the Bulls at the end of the 80s, right? And you get into the playoffs in some of those last couple of years, and Jordan is like, all right, Jordan, you're going to play point guard. You're going to have all of the possessions. Your offensive load's going to spike up. And then for somebody like Phil Jackson to come in and be like, we're going to instill this completely different kind of offense that we borrowed from Tex Winter. Obviously, Scottie Pippen's going to come into his own. We're going to get some more talent. But then you can just see offensively they spike and then spike again and buy in defensively, right? So you're able to take a guy that's played a specific way for all of these years, and then you have somebody come in and be like, hey, let's try this other way. I know it's going to work. You got to trust me. And I think that's the key part of coaching that's so hard to put your finger on, because you never know if there's a star issue. You don't know if there's a coach issue if you can't get somebody to buy in. So I don't know. Just shout out to the coaches that are able to problem solve like this, both on the fly, behind the scenes, preparing for a team. high level talent, maybe not as good of talent. It's just it's so fun to try and see what coaches are able to scheme up for the parts that they have on a team.
Well, this gets back to Memphis, don't you think? Where
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned it earlier, but you make these changes, and then someone like John Morant's like, why am I not running more pick and roll? Why am I not? I've grown up feeling comfortable dominating the ball. Why am I not dominating the ball and making the decisions? He's objectively a good passer.
Yeah.
He's objectively a good penetrator and hard to stay in front of. So you meld that with the personality, and he's like, why are we running this stupid offense? And it's like the stupid offense might be working better for the whole team, but it feels grating, right? It feels wrong, and like your talent isn't being utilized. And to some degree, your talent isn't being utilized. So if we come full circle back to Miami,
Yep.
because they're just fascinating in the abstract. I'm glad other people are talking about them, so I don't have to feel bad about constantly punting the detailed analysis of the beautiful Heat system down the road. The Miami system requires all the players on the court to essentially be shooters and penetrators.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're going for. They're trying to create one-on-one situations, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were to say, AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., clear out. Everybody get out of the way. Take your man. Let's go. It wouldn't work if you were trying to say, okay, you're going to help. We're going to play 5 out. We're going to open the paint. AJ Green's going to get the ball. Let's say he gets by his man. You can help off Giannis because then Giannis is open for 3. What the Heat are going for is guys that can attack and guys that shoot, and guys that can attack closeouts and get downhill and shoot from the perimeter on a basic kick out, a basic spray out once you get a paint touch. That is not the skill set of a superstar offensive player.
Mm-mm.
It's a nice skill set. You see it, but like who would you say is the Heat's best offensive player?
Oh wow. Norm Powell, probably.
I think it's Norm Powell.
Yeah.
I think it's Norm Powell. Now, is anyone I love Norm Powell. I love watching him play. I think he's really fun. But is anyone going to say Norm Powell's one of the 10 or 15 best offensive players in the league or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
So it's like the fit of the system and the solution you come up with and the different, not just an individual star. That's what makes it so interesting, I think, from a basketball perspective. If you're one individual star, Luka Doncic or Giannis Antetokounmpo, he can take, at least in the regular season, so many facets of your offense and put them on his shoulders by himself, right? But if you don't have that, how do you reconfigure the offense to be really successful? And I think this is what Greg Popovich did with the Spurs. And I didn't mention him earlier because I think he's almost in a special category where, was it ceiling raising, Cody, when he took, Marco Bellinelli and Patty Mills and Thiago Splitter, shout out Coach Splitter, and Boris Diaw and, 36-year-old Manu Ginobili, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the fun bench players on that team, but literally made them one of the best offenses in the league and one of the best offenses we've seen. This wasn't a case of taking scrappy parts and making them the 12th best offense. This was a team of taking different parts and going, okay, I have a little bit of shooting here, or I have a lot of shooting here. I have some extra passing here. I have some ball handling and playmaking here. I have some movement shooting here. I'm going to make sure every lineup has these different configurations where we get something greater than the sum of the parts. That's an alchemy that I don't know if we've ever seen it matched in the NBA.
And he's talked about, you go and look at some of those seminars that they do. I think the FIBA YouTube channel does a good job of showing a bunch of these seminars where coaches talk through some of their philosophies and whatnot. Popovich talks about part of the scouting process is finding guys that are going to buy into these kinds of systems, right? So he specifically, in his mind, his coaching staff and wherever else, looked out for players to be like, yes, you are going to buy into this sort of role. You're going to move the ball. You're going to move without the ball. You're going to be able to shoot, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you take these role players, but they're role players that are primed to fit around this kind of a system. Like they're specifically chosen for this sort of thing. Shout out Danny Green. I don't think you said his name in that beautiful statement.
Thank you. I forgot Danny Green. Thank you.
I think a couple of other teams that their offenses aren't as good. Like the Bulls are right in the middle of the pack in terms of
this year's Bulls.
Yeah, this year's Chicago Bulls.
I was just going to ask you about this year's Chicago. What's going on?
So they kind of have the same sort of thing where the lineups that they have, it feels like they have a bunch of dudes 5 out that can shoot the ball, but also if you close out on them or they have some space, they can attack the basket. Like, I think Kevin Huerter is a great example of somebody who I think is an underrated second side attacker and creator. Like, he can get into the teeth of the defense, and I actually think he's more comfortable doing that than just spotting up in the corner and shooting. You can always go back, and the beauty of having both Giddey and Vucevic on the court together is you can always kind of reset to hitting one of them at the nail, hitting one of them at the top of the perimeter, running some kind of dribble handoff actions. And then you have guys like Ayo Dosunmu, who is just like a snake when he drives to the basket. Like, he's so slithery, and there's so many times that with the spacing and the movement that happening, he can just take a sliver of this space that the defense gets and gets in there for a layup. So I just think that's an interesting team that also has built around a bunch of players that are comfortable moving around, moving the ball, making decisions off the catch. So again, not as successful as an offense as Miami, but I also don't know if I would look at the Bulls and say, yeah, this could be the 15th best offense in the league.
Did you ever run the weave in high school?
Like, as a warm-up drill?
No, but you know the concept, right? You're like out on the perimeter and you're pitching the ball around. And as you pitch it from player to player, you could turn the corner and create a driving lane.
Yeah.
These teams feel there's a lot of what we're talking about has the essence of that same idea, where I feel like a number of teams in the league are playing like this right now, where you can get to the middle of the floor, you want to get downhill, you want to create space, and therefore that selects for different skills. So when you look at the Bulls, I was going to ask you about them for this exact reason that you brought them up. It's like, who would be the star driver of offense on the Bulls from a classic on-ball pick and roll perspective? It would be Giddey, but he's not close to what we think of when we go to the Trae Young, Luka Doncic, that category of player, right? What about from an isolation scoring perspective? Probably no one.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Kawhi, there's no Shea, there's no Kobe, we don't have that approach. What about an off-ball kind of? Would it be Huerter? But Huerter's not at the level of a Klay Thompson or Reggie Miller, or Ray Allen, or even a Peja or somebody like that. So you have like no clear avenue to construct certain offenses we've seen in the past built around those types of players or a combination of those types of players. And yet what you get with Chicago, I feel like, is a lot of downhill pressure, pitch, handoff, middle of the court, crack it open. And then when you kick, now you've got Buzelis on attacking a closeout. You've got Kevin Huerter on the shot or attacking a closeout. You mentioned Dosunmu, right? I feel like a ton of teams in the league are playing like this. And this is almost the personality of the 2026 season for me, which I think is why we've landed here today on this topic, right? You just turn on so many teams and they're just trying to create these little advantages. Miami almost embodies where the league is going this season. It's like, we got an advantage. We got a little half step. We're getting downhill into the paint and we're going to force you to come and help. And if you come and help, kick out 3-shooter, kick out, attack a bigger lane coming downhill. There's so much space and there's so much shooting and there's so much skill, but it's not the skill of an MVP player.
It's the same thing with the Portland Trailblazers too, where we talked about where they have these, baseline cutting actions where they have to leverage the fact that these guys aren't great spot up shooters, but if you get them cutting to the basket baseline, people are going to have a hard time stopping that, right? And then Drew Holiday being a not traditional point guard who's going to run all of those, pick and rolls and things like that. So I think you're right. The season seems to be defined by non-traditional, whereas I feel like if you went 6 years ago, 5 years ago or something like that, it felt like there is, I don't want to say a crisis, that's too much, but it felt like there was a lot of 5-out pick and roll. Switching defense was heavily in vogue because that was the way to stop a lot of these isolation possession heavy type things. But yeah, I think we're very far away from that. And we're seeing a lot more experimentation offensively. You also said Buzelis.
Yes.
I mean, capital A, capital A athlete. Like, this is a guy that when you turn him on, it's like the Shaden Sharp, Derek Jones Jr., where it's like every second there's a chance there's just going to be a monster jam, just an enormous dunk, because he is coming for your head and you either got to block it or get out of the way because he is ferocious the way that he attacks the rim. So shout out to him. He's just one of the most fun players, I think, to see when he's just chaotically charging to the basket.
To support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. We've got all kinds of stuff over there, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball, including our member videos, which we're spinning up. There's so many good games and so many stories coming down the pike. There's just got a backlog to get through with some of those, covering some of those more subtle things that we get to in member videos. Cody, this has been a fun journey for me today. Just kind of making sense of the fuzziness of the beginning of the NBA season. I think there's a lot of parity. I think a lot of this parity comes from what we're talking about, where teams are sort of selecting for these players that have these particular skills, and they're getting 4 or 5 of them out on the court at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to see Miami is like this extreme example,
Mm-hmm.
but elements of what we talked about today not only apply to the teams we talk about, but they apply to the Celtics offense at times. They apply to the 76ers offense at times with those speedy guards and slashers and just trying to create space and get downhill. I don't know how many games I've seen Toronto play. Maybe it applies to them. You know, I know Darko's trying some crazy X's and O's stuff there, but this feels like, in one sense, the direction that a lot of the middle class of the league is taking, and it's very interesting. It's definitely different than what we talked about with Houston. It's definitely different than OKC. It's definitely different with the Nuggets. I mean, who just, obviously fantastic offense every year, totally different kind of structure. So this has helped me a little bit draw some boundaries around what we're seeing to start the season.
So I think if Miami is the team that kind of is the emblem for what we're seeing so far, I think we should put forth Tyrese Maxey as being the player to do this, because I think he is the preeminent star offensive player right now that is scoring and creating opportunities off these non-traditional ways. Like, he is not a super high, pick and roll, 50 pick and rolls a game or something like that. We've talked about the ability to use these off-ball screens, the ability to charge in the paint, the cut, and things like that. So shout out to Maxey and the 76ers and what they've been able to do. Ben, there's one team I need to investigate more. And it's good we're ending the episode here, because this is a challenge to myself to figure out what's going on here. The Minnesota Timberwolves have the 4th best offense in the NBA.
Yeah.
And if you ask me why right now, couldn't tell you.
Well, I know they're shooting very well from 3.
Okay.
Which is a curiosity to me. Does it mean they're actually a very good 3-point shooting team? Or is this simply just, we've played 10 games and you've shot well across those 10 games? I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. 41% as of recording this from downtown for the Timberwolves. And it's the same cast of characters, right? It's Naz Reid, Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, shooting 40% from 3, and Rudy Gobert. But yes, they are an interesting team to investigate in the sense that they have Anthony Edwards. And you would think they're building offensive systems around Anthony Edwards' strength. So we will put that on our to-do board. Cody's got some homework for next week, because are we going to do power rankings next week? I like last week I was like, we can't do power rankings. There's just no sample size. And today I almost when we started was like, Cody, we have to do emergency power rankings. We're right there. The season is taking form in front of our eyes.
I'm glad you waited a week, because there's like Darius Garland. I want to see a couple games with somebody like him back. I need to get a fair shake at Cleveland here. I need to look at the Timberwolves, but I think the power rankings are going to look quite a bit different from what we talked about with the preview. Ben, I'm on nervous watch right now. My people are calling me about the Clippers and how high I was about their floor, and we're trying to calm everyone down here. We're trying to calm everyone down.
Man, I want to give myself an L already for the Clippers floor, just because if you think about the logic, where we're like, yes, they have a lot of good players, but also we talked extensively about how old they are. That only works with younger players, where you're like, we have a lot of depth. 1 or 2 of the younger players might be out. When you're all old, you could all be out at the same time, and I think that's the challenge for the Clippers right now.
I also think, I haven't watched as much Clippers as I would like. I've been disheartened. I've been hurt by them a little bit, so I've been afraid to check in. But just, taking a peek and knowing the roster, not a ton of offensively flexible players, one might say. So perhaps in a league now that is a little bit more progressive forward in their offenses, maybe we overrated what they would be able to do with the old dog, new tricks sort of offense.
You know why?
Why?
They gave up Norm Powell.
That's looking like a pretty mighty mistake right now.
They sent him to his rightful birthplace of the Miami Heat culture. Thanks for listening to this one all the way through. Hope you're enjoying the year, and of course, hope you are having a great day.